Rust and rations. That was the whole of my world. I watched Grogan's greasy fingers trace the cracked housing of the water purifier. His stall was an alcove of scavenged junk in the echoing expanse of Habitation Sector 7, a place we'd come to call the Undercroft. Our home was the belly of a dead god, an ancient terraforming engine whose name had been lost 1,000 years before we were even born. "The filter membrane is nearly shot, Mags," he grunted, not looking at me. His eyes were fixed on the 2 chipped-cased batteries I'd placed on the counter. "Barely worth one of these." "It cycles," I countered, my voice flat. "It doesn't leak. That's more than you can say for half the junk you peddle." 2 batteries, firm. The air, thick with the smell of ozone, hot metal, and the ever-present fungal damp, carried the usual market sounds. The haggling of other scavengers, the clatter of dropped tools, the distant, rhythmic drip of condensation. Grogan sighed, the theatrical sound of a man who knows he's beaten but needs to make a show of it. He slid 1 battery back towards me. 1.5. I'll give you a credit slip for the other. I opened my mouth to argue, a ritual we'd performed 100 times before, but the words died on my tongue. Beneath my feet, through the worn soles of my boots, a vibration started. It wasn't the familiar shudder of a pressure plate equalizing, or the groan of ancient metal shifting its weight. This was different. It was a hum, low and clean and resonant, a pure tone that sank into the marrow of my bones. Grogan didn't seem to notice, his attention now on a potential customer examining a pitted wrench. No one did. The market's din continued unabated. But for me, the world had gone quiet, all other sounds muted by this foundational thrum. It felt purposeful. I placed my palm flat against the grated decking. The vibration coursed through my hand, steady and powerful. It was the sound of a machine coming online. A machine that had been dormant for longer than human history. My blood ran cold. I'd spent 40 years in the Undercroft, longer than anyone. I knew its silences and its groans. I knew the song of its slow decay. This was not that song. "Something's wrong," I muttered, my gaze sweeping the cavernous space. The distant glow panels flickered in their steady rhythm. The streams of vapor from ceiling vents coiled in the air as they always did. Nothing looked different, but everything felt different. Grogan finally looked up, catching the look on my face. "What's got you spooked, old woman? The engine settles, always has." "This isn't settling." My voice was tight. I could feel the hum in my teeth now. It was a presence, an intelligence made of gears and power conduits, awakening from an eon of slumber. I snatched the filter and the remaining battery off the counter, stuffing them into my satchel. "Hey, we had a deal!" Grogan shouted after me. I ignored him. My focus was on the thrumming that was building, not in volume, but in complexity. It was like hearing a single instrument that was now being joined by others deep in the guts of the station, playing a symphony I couldn't comprehend. The other squatters were deaf to it, their faces complacent, caught up in their small daily struggles for rust and rations. They were sheep in a slaughterhouse, admiring the paint on the walls. Fools. The thought was sharp and bitter. They had no idea. They had no memory of the silence that came before. They were born into the Undercroft's slow death rattle and mistook it for life. This new sound, this steady, rising hum, was not the sound of decay. It was the sound of a function starting, a procedure, and in a place this old, this alien, any function that started on its own was a death sentence. I had to get them out. I had to make them listen. My heart hammered against my ribs, a panicked drumbeat against the machine's rising, resonant bass. I found them in the Central Commons, the largest open area in Sector 7, where the vaulted ceiling was high enough to catch the echoes of a dozen conversations at once. Cale was holding court, of course. Young, handsome, with a fool's smile and a voice full of easy confidence. He was telling a story about outsmarting a malfunctioning harvester drone. The gathered crowd laughed, their faces upturned and hopeful. They loved him. They loved the way he made living in a tomb feel like an adventure. The hum was more pronounced here, a steady throb in the air that made my skull ache. Still, no one else seemed to hear it, or if they did, they dismissed it as background noise. I shoved my way through the listeners, my boots clanging on the deck plate. "Pack your things," I said, my voice raw and loud enough to cut through Cale's story. "Everything you can carry. We're leaving, now." A silence fell over the commons. Every eye turned to me. I could see the mix of expressions: surprise, annoyance, a few glimmers of concern from the older ones who remembered I wasn't prone to theatrics. Cale turned, his easy smile faltering for a second before snapping back into place. "Mags, you're interrupting. Take a breath." "There's no time to breathe," I shot back, planting my feet. "The engine is waking up. Can't you feel it? The vibration? It's not a settling, it's a power-up sequence." A ripple of uneasy muttering went through the crowd. Cale held up a hand, silencing them instantly. "It's the grand cycle heat pump, Mags. We've all felt it before. It kicks in every few decades, shunts some sludge around. It's harmless." "This isn't the heat pump," I insisted, my voice rising with a desperation I hated. It made me sound unhinged. "The heat pump is a groan, a clank. This is clean. It's a system coming online, something deep." Cale stepped towards me, his expression shifting to one of pitying condescension. "We are safe here, Mags. This is our home. The Undercroft protects us. You've been scavenging the dark tunnels for too long. You're seeing ghosts where there's only old metal." "You're a child who has never known a quiet day," I snarled. "You think these walls are your friend? This place wasn't built for us. We're mold growing in the cracks, and the owner is about to light a fire to sterilize the room." His face hardened. He saw my panic as a challenge to his authority, to the comfortable illusion he'd built. "You're scaring people. There's nowhere else to go. We stay. We are stronger here, together." A chorus of assent rose from the crowd. They wanted to believe him. The alternative, that their only sanctuary was turning on them, was too terrifying to contemplate. I looked from face to face, seeing my own frantic warning reflected back as skepticism, scorn, and fear of the unknown I was trying to push them towards. An old woman, Yara, who'd lost her son to a tunnel collapse years ago, shuffled forward. "She's right to be cautious, Kyle," Yara said, her voice thin. "Mags knows the engine's ways." "Mags knows paranoia," he retorted smoothly, dismissing her with a glance. "She wants us to run into the dark, trading this for nothing. I say we trust our home." The choice was clear in their eyes. They would pick the pretty lie from the handsome youth over the ugly truth from the bitter old woman. My shoulders slumped. It was always like this. People would rather die comfortable and ignorant than live with the strain of a terrible reality. My instinct to save them soured into a familiar, curdling disgust. I had tried. My authority, whatever was left of it, had crumbled into dust. "Fine," I spat, turning my back on them. "Stay here and trust your tomb. Die with your pretty hopes." I stalked away, their whispers and Kael's comforting reassurances following me like a shroud. I was alone, a prophet of a ruin no one else had the sense to see. The hum in my bones felt like a clock, counting down the seconds to their inevitable end. My words had been a bluff, a bitter lashing out born of frustration. I couldn't just leave them. The disgust I felt for their willful ignorance was eclipsed by the gnawing, thankless sense of responsibility I'd always carried. They were fools, but they were my fools. If I couldn't convince them with words, I'd have to show them with cold, hard proof. I gathered the few who still held a sliver of doubt. Yara, the old woman, a quiet pair of siblings named Ilara and Finn, and a wiry mechanic called Jax who trusted machines more than people. I told them my plan. We'd go to the main egress lift in Sector 9. I would power it up, open the massive blast doors for a moment, and show them the cold, dead vacuum of the surface beyond. Proof that an escape route existed. It was our only way out. If I could just get them to see the doors open, fear might finally break through their complacency. The journey through the interconnecting corridors was tense. The hum was a constant companion, a presence that seemed to thicken the air and press in on us from all sides. Jax kept tapping at the walls with a wrench, his brow furrowed. "It's not just a vibration," he murmured, his voice tight. "There's power flowing, heavy current. The conduits in these walls haven't carried a load like this in my lifetime." We reached the egress chamber, a vast circular room dominated by the lift platform and the colossal interlocking plates of the main doors. Emergency lighting cast long, dancing shadows, making the space feel both immense and claustrophobic. The air was colder here, tasting of sterile metal. I marched to the control panel, a slab of dark, alien material set into the wall. Its surface was usually dormant, dead. But it wasn't dead now. My stomach clenched. A series of symbols glowed on its surface, pulsating with a soft crimson light. They weren't the standard maintenance prompts I knew. These were sharp, angular, and complex. Cathar glyphs from the race of long-dead architects who had built this machine. Warning glyphs. "What is that?" Ilara whispered, clutching her brother's arm. "It's a lockdown sequence," Jack said, his voice barely audible. He ran a hand over the glowing panel, not quite daring to touch it. "I've only seen these in old schematics, quarantine protocols." My heart hammered against my ribs. I ignored him, my hands moving with practiced familiarity. I slapped the primary activation plate. A deep, resonant clang echoed through the chamber, but it wasn't the sound of machinery engaging. It was the sound of something refusing to move. The doors remained shut. The glyphs pulsed brighter, a deep, angry red. I tried again, slamming my palm against the plate. Nothing. I went for the manual override, a heavy lever sunk into the floor. I put all my weight into it, my muscles straining. It didn't budge, welded in place as if by an invisible force. Panic began to claw its way up my throat, cold and sharp. "It's no good," Jack said, his face pale in the red glow. "The station has locked us out, or locked us in." The terrifying, absolute certainty of it settled over me. This wasn't a malfunction. This was a deliberate action. The station, in its awakening state, had assessed our sector. It had identified our presence, and its response was to seal the exits. We hadn't been overlooked. We had been categorized. The red glyphs weren't just a warning. They were a verdict. They designated our home, our entire world, for containment, for quarantine. The only clear path to safety, the one hope I was banking on to scare my people into action, was gone. It had been taken from us by the silent, unthinking will of the machine itself. We weren't residents anymore. We were a contamination, and the hum that filled the silence felt like the purr of a predator that had just finished setting its trap. The crimson glow of the sealed egress doors haunted me. We were caged. The easy way out was gone, welded shut by a silent alien intelligence that had judged us and found us wanting. Kale and the others were living on borrowed time, death to the ticking clock that was now a deafening roar in my head. If there was another way out, I had to find it, and to do that, I needed to know what was coming. That meant going down, deep down, into the engineering sublevels. The place was a taboo, a boogeyman in the stories we told our children, a labyrinth of forgotten machinery and rusted-out corridors, whispered to be haunted by the ghosts of the engine, the malfunctioning automatons that still roamed its lowest depths. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I did believe in half-crazed maintenance drones. I took only Jax with me. He was scared, but his knowledge of Cathar systems was indispensable, and his fear was tempered by a burning curiosity. We pried open a corroded service hatch in the floor of an abandoned storage bay and descended into the cloying darkness, our headlamps cutting sharp, dancing cones through air thick with the dust of centuries. The hum was different here, raw and visceral. It wasn't just in the floor. It was in the very walls, a thrumming current that made the metal around us feel alive. We moved slowly, our footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence between the thrums. The air tasted of ozone and hot circuits. Twice, we had to flatten ourselves into grimy alcoves as rogue maintenance drones trundled past. Heavy, beetle-like machines dragging sparking cables, their optical sensors dead or flickering erratically. Deeper in, we found it. A sub-level control nexus. A small room dominated by a large, dormant Cathar terminal. It was caked in grime, but the power conduits leading to it pulsed with a faint light. "It's drawing from the main grid," Jax breathed, his awe momentarily overcoming his fear. "Mags, this thing might actually work." It took him 20 minutes of coaxing, of bypassing fused circuits and rerouting auxiliary power. But then the terminal shuddered to life. A wave of emerald-green glyphs flooded the screen, their alien syntax flowing too quickly to read. "I'm in," Jax whispered, his fingers flying across the touch-sensitive interface. Accessing sector status logs. It's classifying Sector 7 under Code Sigma 9. Biomass anomaly detected. My blood ran cold. Biomass anomaly. That's all we were. An infestation. Not people, not a community, just an unplanned biological presence. "What is Code Sigma 9? I demanded, my voice tight. Jax's hands froze over the console. His face, illuminated by the green glow, was a mask of pure horror. He swallowed hard. "It's a system integrity protocol," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "A deep cleanse function. The hum, it's the primary energy capacitors charging for a plasma scour of the entire sector." He tapped another series of glyphs, and a new screen appeared. A countdown timer. My Cathar was rusty, but I could read the numbers. My stomach dropped into a void. How long? Jax didn't look at me. His eyes were glued to the screen, to the silent, scrolling logs of an ancient, automated process that was about to erase our existence. "Mags," he said, his voice trembling. "It's a 12-hour charge cycle. It started 9 hours ago. 3 hours. We had 3 hours until our entire world, our homes, our market, Kale and his hopeful fools, all of it was turned into superheated plasma. The logs were more horrifying than any ghost story. There was no malice here, no evil intent. It was just a protocol. An automated, impersonal, and utterly final extermination program set to fire in less time than it took for the night cycle lamps to dim. We were just a line item in a maintenance routine. The hum was not a warning. It was a promise of total incineration. We scrambled back up from the sublevels. The timer on the Cathar terminal burned into my mind. The horror of it was a physical weight crushing the air from my lungs. 3 hours, 2 by the time we reached the commons again. As we emerged, the hum had changed once more. It was higher-pitched now, shot through with a sharp, crackling energy. It felt like the air itself was tightening, growing brittle. The commons were in chaos. Kale was still there, but his confident swagger had evaporated. He stood amidst a crowd of terrified people, their faces pale and streaked with dust. The reason for their panic was immediately clear. The scrubbers were here. Dozens of them. They were small, insectile maintenance drones, no bigger than a large dog, that normally patrolled the lower levels, cleaning coolant spills and sealing microfractures. We'd always seen them as harmless, almost comical, scuttling pests, but they weren't harmless now. They moved with a chilling, synchronized purpose, their multifaceted optical sensors glowing with a predatory red light. They weren't attacking people. They were attacking our home. With unnerving precision, a scrubber would approach a wall panel of one of the makeshift HAB units, brace itself with its 6 spindly legs, and then a high-intensity plasma cutter would extend from its chassis. A beam of white-hot energy would lance out, carving through the metal alloy like it was synth cardboard. With a deafening shriek of tearing metal, a wall would fall away, exposing the meager contents of someone's life to the open commons. Then the scrubbers would move on to the next structure and the next, systematically, methodically. They were deconstructing our settlement, shearing away our walls, our privacy, our safety. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning metal and ionized particles. "What are they doing?" a woman shrieked as the wall of her home was sliced into smoking pieces. "They're hurting us," I said, my voice grim. Jax was beside me, trembling but resolute. He'd seen the logs. He knew what this was. "They're not killing us. They're demolishing our cover, flushing us out into the open." The community scattered before the slow, inexorable advance of the machines. The scrubbers ignored us completely. Their programming focused solely on dismantling the environment. Their cold, mechanical indifference was more terrifying than outright aggression. We weren't worth their attention. We were just vermin to be driven from our nests before the exterminator arrived. Kyle saw me, his eyes wide with a fear he could no longer hide behind his charisma. "Mags, you were right. What is this? What's happening?" "It's a sterilization protocol," I yelled over the screech of a plasma cutter. "The whole sector is going to be incinerated. We have less than 2 hours." The raw, unfiltered terror on his face was almost satisfying, but the feeling was fleeting, replaced by the crushing urgency of our situation. He had sold them a comforting lie, and now the truth was literally tearing down the walls around them. The people were being pushed back, deeper into the sector, forced away from the dismantled outer habs and corralled towards the dense central hab block near the main cargo bay. A horrible realization dawned on me. The machines weren't just flushing us out, they were concentrating us, gathering all the biomass in one convenient location. The station wasn't just cleaning house, it was doing it with terrifying efficiency. The methodical march of the scrubbers was the first step in a cold, calculated process of annihilation. Panic had taken root, a contagious fever spreading through the corralled community. The rhythmic, shrieking surgery of the scrubber drones was the soundtrack to our world ending. People were weeping, screaming, or just standing frozen, their faces slack with disbelief as their homes were systematically unmade before their eyes. Cale was a broken man, his confident leadership shattered, replaced by the same frantic terror as everyone else. I was barking orders, trying to get people to grab water and med kits, but my voice was lost in the chaos. It was in that moment of near total despair that Cale's expression shifted. A flicker of something that wasn't fear lit his eyes. Hope. "Wait!" he yelled, his voice cracking but clear enough to cut through the din. "There's a way! There might be a way!" All eyes, mine included, turned to him. He pointed a trembling finger towards the far end of the commons, towards the colossal, sealed doors of the primary cargo bay, Bay 3. "In there, I've been working on it. A secret." He ran towards a small access panel beside the bay doors, the crowd parting for him. He keyed in a sequence, and with a hiss of ancient pneumatics, a smaller service door slid open. Kyle disappeared inside, and a moment later, the cavernous bay was flooded with the steady, powerful hum of a working engine and the glow of floodlights. Hesitantly, we followed him in. And there, sitting in the center of the vast, dusty space, was our salvation, or so it seemed. It was a K-SAR Siphon-class mining shuttle. It was a beast of a machine, not sleek or fast, but bulky, heavily armored, and built for brute force. Its hull was scarred and pitted, but its cockpit lights were on, and a low, powerful thrum emanated from its stern. "I've been patching her up for years," KL announced, his voice filled with a desperate, triumphant pride. He stood beside the landing gear, basking in the sudden, adoring awe of the crowd. Scavenged power cells, rerouted the energy conduits. She's fully charged. The outer hull is reinforced plating. It's tough enough to punch through a secondary maintenance hatch. It can get us out of the sector. It can save us. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a fragile tendril of hope unfurled in my chest. I hated it. Hope was a vulnerability, a luxury we could never afford. But as I looked at the solid, powerful machine, at its thick plating and glowing viewport, I allowed myself to feel it. A shuttle, a working, armored shuttle. It was more than a long shot, it was a miracle. A cheer erupted from the crowd, a ragged, cathartic sound of pure relief. They swarmed around Kyle, clapping him on the back, their tears of terror turning into tears of joy. He was their savior again. His lie had almost doomed them, but his secret project might just save them all. I pushed my way to the shuttle, running a hand along its cold, dusty hull. It was real. Jax was right behind me, his eyes wide, running diagnostics in his head. "The power readings are stable," he breathed. "The integrity looks... Max, it might actually work." The scrubbers were still out there, their cutting torches getting closer, their systematic demolition driving everyone towards us. We were being funneled directly into the cargo bay. It felt too convenient. But faced with the alternative of certain incineration, the siphon shuttle felt like an ark. Our last, best chance. "Get everyone aboard!" Kyle yelled, climbing the ramp into the cockpit. "Strap yourselves in! We're getting out of this tomb!" The community surged forward, a desperate, stumbling mass of humanity, their faith in Kyle restored and magnified. They saw the shuttle as he did, a chariot of their deliverance, a testament to hope in the face of annihilation. We piled into the shuttle's cavernous cargo hold, a frantic crush of bodies smelling of sweat and fear. The space was designed for hauling ore, not people, but no one cared. We crammed ourselves in, shoulder to shoulder, the faces around me a mixture of tear-streaked relief and giddy anticipation. Ilara and Finn found a spot against a bulkhead, huddled together. Old Yara offered me a weak, grateful smile. Even I, in my hardened cynicism, felt the icy grip of dread loosen its hold. The low, steady thrum of the shuttle's engines was a comforting promise, a deep, mechanical heartbeat that swore we would survive. Through the thick, grimy viewport in the main hatch, I could see the last of our settlement being torn apart. The scrubbers worked relentlessly, their plasma cutters creating a curtain of sparks and molten slag. The walls of the commons beyond were beginning to glow, a faint cherry red that spoke of terrifying energies building within the station's superstructure. The heat was coming. "Everyone in?" Kyle's voice crackled over the shuttle's internal comms, strained but triumphant. "Hold on, I'm taking us out." The shuttle's engine noise deepened, the deck plates vibrating with nascent power. A collective sigh of relief washed through the hold. This was it. We were leaving. Then came the sound, a sickening, high-pitched thunk screech that was not part of the shuttle's launch sequence. The engine died. The powerful thrum cut out instantly, replaced by a sudden tomb-like silence. The interior lights flickered and went dark, plunging us into near-total blackness, lit only by the hellish red glow from outside the viewport. A collective gasp, then a rising tide of panicked questions filled the dark. What was that? Kyle, what's happening? Through the viewport, I saw it. Two thick metallic arms had descended from the ceiling of the cargo bay, locking onto the shuttle, siphoning its power. Simultaneously, the colossal bay doors began to slide shut, not with a smooth hiss, but with the groan of finality. A bead of white-hot plasma ran along the seam where the doors met, welding them together with a scream of melting metal. My flicker of hope was extinguished, replaced by a cold, black certainty. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. The shuttle was never our escape. It was never Kyle's secret weapon. It was a component of the station's system. It was bait. A comfortable, enclosed space designed to gather all the biomass in one convenient container for disposal. The machine hadn't been outsmarted. It had used our most human instinct, our desperate need for hope, to herd us into a pen. "No, no, no, no!" Kyle's voice, now raw with agony, came from the front of the hold. The cockpit door burst open, and he stumbled out, a heavy plasma torch in his hand. "I can cut through the door! I can get us out!" He lunged for the main hatch, but he never made it. A panel slid open in the ceiling of our metal cage, and a slender, articulated arm dropped down. It moved with liquid speed, ending not in a tool, but a simple, sharpened point. It plunged into Kyle's back with a soft, wet thump. He froze, a look of utter, surprised betrayal on his face, before collapsing to the deck, his torch clattering beside him. His last hope died, and with it, the hope of everyone in that steel coffin. The arm retracted into the ceiling, as if it had simply swatted a fly. The low hum of the station returned, louder now, and the red glow from outside intensified, casting the horrified faces in the hold in the colors of a forge. The air was already growing warmer. We weren't in an ark. We were in an oven. The heat was becoming oppressive. It seeped through the shuttle's hull, turning our steel sanctuary into a pressure cooker. Panic, thick and choking, filled the darkness. The weeping had turned to screams. People beat their fists against the welded doors, their desperate blows a pathetic drumming against the shell of our tomb. Cale's body lay where it had fallen, a silent, grim testament to our folly. We had willingly walked into this cage. My mind raced, churning through 40 years of scavenged knowledge, of overheard whispers and fragmented schematics I'd pored over by lamplight. There was no way through the doors. The hull was designed to withstand incredible stresses. We were trapped. The station was going to cook us alive, neatly and efficiently. An idea, cold and desperate, surfaced from the depths of my memory. It was an old scavenger's tale, a ghost story told over foul-tasting liquor to scare greenhorns. They spoke of the Sector Anchor, the gravitational heart of Sector 7, located in the core chamber directly below the central hab block. It was a colossal piece of K-Thar technology that regulated the localized gravity, keeping the thousands of tons of metal and machinery from collapsing in on itself. The legend said that a controlled overload of the anchor's power conduit would be catastrophic. Not a fizzle, a rupture. An explosion powerful enough to shatter the very foundation of the sector. A suicidal gamble. Overloading it would almost certainly kill us, but the plasma scour from above would kill us. One was a certainty, the other a chance. A sliver of a chance so thin it was transparent. An explosion from below, if it didn't vaporize us instantly, might just blow a hole clean through the floor. A hole into the unmapped foundations of the undercroft, the deep, dark places that existed before the sectors were even built. A fall into darkness was better than an agonizing death by fire. "Quiet!" I roared, my voice raw, cutting through the din of terror. The screams subsided into whimpers. In the hellish red light, every eye turned to me. They were broken, hopeless, looking for anyone to tell them what to do. The mantle of leadership I had never wanted was now an anchor around my neck. "Crying isn't going to stop the heat," I said, my voice hard as steel. I knelt beside Kyle's body, ignoring the stunned gasps, and took the heavy-duty plasma torch from his cooling fingers. Its power cell was nearly full. We can't go forward, we can't go up, so we're going down. Jax pushed his way towards me, his face slick with sweat. "Down where, Max? There's nothing below us but 10 meters of reinforced deck plate." "Below that is the core chamber," I said, looking him in the eye. "And in that chamber is the gravitational anchor. The legends are real, Jax. I've seen the primary conduits on old schematics. We're going to overload it." His eyes went wide with a new kind of terror. "Overload the... Mags, that's insane. The feedback would be unimaginable. It would rip the entire sector apart." "Exactly," I said, my voice grim. I scanned the terrified faces around me. Most were paralyzed by fear, but a few I could see a spark. The hard-bitten few who would rather die fighting than cowering. Ilara and Finn stood up, their young faces set with a desperate resolve. Yara, surprisingly, squared her frail shoulders. A few other scavengers, people I knew had grit, stepped forward. "The plasma fire is coming from above," I said, my voice ringing with a conviction I didn't entirely feel. "It will burn through this hull in minutes. Our choice is simple. We can sit here and be incinerated, or we can follow me, crack the anchor, and blow a hole in the bottom of our world. We either burn or we fall. Who's with me?" I powered up the torch. It hissed to life, its brilliant white light a stark contrast to the red gloom. My plan wasn't a promise of survival. It was just a different way to die, with a ghost of a chance at something else. But in our final moments, it was the only hope we had left. The plasma torch carved a shrieking, molten circle in the shuttle's floor. The air filled with the stench of vaporized metal as I kicked the glowing plate free, revealing the grated decking of the cargo bay below. I dropped through, followed by a handful of souls, Jax, Ilara, Finn, Yara, and 4 other grim-faced scavengers. Barely a dozen of us. The rest remained in the shuttle, a huddled mass of paralyzed terror, choosing the certainty of their metal tomb. I didn't look back. The cargo bay was an inferno. The outer walls now glowed a bright, angry orange, radiating a heat that blistered the skin. The scrubbers were gone, their work done. Now the station was turning up the heat. "The main access to the core is sealed," Jax yelled over the roar of superheating air. "The control systems are all in lockdown." "We're not using the main access," I yelled back, pulling a heavy crowbar from my belt. "We're going through the guts." I led them to a maintenance duct in the floor, its cover already warped by the heat. Together, we pried it open and descended into a cramped service tunnel. It was my territory. For decades, I had navigated these forgotten arteries of the Undercroft, the service conduits, the power chases, the reclamation pipes. I knew the secret paths, the shortcuts that weren't on any official schematic. Our journey was a desperate crawl through hell. The narrow corridors were a gauntlet of environmental hazards activated by the sterilization protocol. Pipes burst, venting jets of superheated steam that could boil a person in seconds. We pressed ourselves against the cooler walls, timing our dashes between the searing white clouds. Automated fire suppression systems sprayed us with corrosive retardant that smoked where it touched our clothes. At one intersection, a series of defensive turrets dropped from the ceiling, their optical sensors glowing. We didn't have weapons to fight them, only the tools on our belts. Thin, quick, and nimble, shimmied up a bundle of cables and jammed a metal pipe into the gears of the nearest turret, disabling it with a shower of sparks just as it acquired a target lock on his sister. Every step was a gamble. Every corner brought a new, automated defense. The hum of the station was a physical force down here, a bone-jarring vibration that shook loose rust and panels from the ceiling. Yara, frail but determined, kept pace, her face a mask of grim resolve. I saw the ghost of her lost son in her eyes, a fire that refused to let her give up. Deeper we went, crawling through conduits barely wide enough for a single person, the metal hot enough to scorch our hands and knees through our clothing. We were no longer in the habitable parts of the station. We were inside the machine itself. Insignificant parasites crawling through its burning veins, heading for its very heart. The heat was relentless, the air thin and tasting of cooked electronics. 2 of the scavengers succumbed, one to a mistimed dash through a steam vent, the other simply collapsing from heat exhaustion, his body left behind in the suffocating dark. We didn't have time to mourn. There was only the core. Only the desperate, insane plan that was our last and only option. We were pilgrims on a final harrowing journey, not to a holy shrine, but to the source of our own annihilation. We emerged from a service conduit into a vast, cavernous chamber that stole our breath. The air pulsed with power, and the hum was a physical roar that vibrated through the floor and into our chests. This was the core. In the center of the chamber, suspended in a web of crackling energy conduits, was the gravitational anchor, a colossal, rotating sphere of impossible blackness, surrounded by rings of humming, gyroscopic machinery. It was the silent, beating heart of Sector 7. But we weren't alone. Guarding the anchor were sentinels. We'd only ever seen them as dormant statues in sealed-off sections. Now they were active. They were humanoid in shape, 8 feet tall, their featureless heads glowing with a single blue optic. They moved with an inhuman grace and terrifying speed. They were not maintenance drones. They were guardians, and we had trespassed in their sacred space. There were 3 of them. As soon as we stepped into the chamber, their heads snapped towards us in perfect unison. There was no warning, no challenge. They simply moved to intercept, their heavy feet clanging on the metal floor. "Jax, the primary conduit, where is it?" I yelled over the deafening roar. I had a single, repurposed mining charge in my satchel, our one and only tool for this suicidal task. "There!" He pointed to a thick, pulsating cable as wide as a man's torso, feeding into the base of the anchor's containment field. "That's the main power feed. A breach there will cause a cascade failure." The sentinels were on us. The first one reached us, its metallic hand lashing out. One of the scavengers, a big man named Rorik, met it with a heavy pipe wrench, which crumpled like paper against the sentinel's arm. The machine backhanded him, sending him flying into a wall with a sickening crunch. He didn't get up. "Buy me time!" I screamed, sprinting towards the conduit. The remaining members of my small, desperate band threw themselves at the machines. It was a battle of flesh and fury against steel and programming. Ilara and Finn worked as a team, using their speed to dodge the Sentinels' methodical attacks, trying to foul their leg joints with scavenged cables. Yara, astoundingly, jammed a crowbar into the knee joint of one sentinel, causing it to stumble for a precious second. It was a battle we could not win, only prolong. I reached the conduit. The heat coming off it was immense. I fumbled in my satchel, pulling out the mining charge. My hands trembled as I armed the magnetic clams and slapped it onto the conduit's armored casing. A high-pitched whine started from the device as it began its 30-second arming sequence. A sentinel swatted Finn aside like a doll and turned its cold blue optic on me. It started forward, its stride unhurried, implacable. Jax saw it coming. With a final, desperate yell, he charged the machine, throwing his body against its legs. The sentinel barely faltered, kicking him away with contemptuous ease. But it had bought me 5 more seconds. 15 seconds left on the timer. The ceiling above us began to glow, a brilliant, terrifying white. The plasma scour had begun. The purge was here. The sentinel was almost upon me. Ilara, seeing her brother unconscious on the floor, let out a scream of pure rage and grief. She launched herself onto the sentinel's back, driving a sharpened piece of rebar into the cluster of wires at the base of its neck. The machine shuddered, its blue optic flickering as it reached back and pulled her off, throwing her to the ground. 5 seconds. The sentinel raised its foot to crush me. The light from above was blinding, the heat beyond agony. I slammed the detonation trigger. The world dissolved into silent white fire. The charge blew, the conduit ruptured, and the gravitational anchor went critical. A wave of pure, unmaking force erupted from the core, meeting the wave of incinerating plasma from above. For a single, eternal moment, I was caught between 2 gods at war. And then everything, the sound, the light, the pain, the world itself, shattered into nothing. Pain was the first thing to return. A brutal,
all-encompassing agony that defined the borders of my broken body. I was hanging, suspended in darkness, one arm twisted at a nauseating angle. A sharp, searing fire in my side told me I was impaled. I tried to take a breath and choked on dust and blood. Slowly, my vision swam back into focus. I was dangling from a thick piece of rebar, my jacket snagged, pinning me like an insect to a board. Below me was nothing. A chasm of absolute lightless black, the bottom of the world. Above, my eyes adjusted to a sight of such terrible, silent beauty that it momentarily erased the pain. Through the gargantuan, ragged hole our suicidal blast had torn in the floor of Sector 7, I could see the aftermath of the sterilization protocol. The plasma scour wasn't a fire. It was a slow, majestic river of incandescent energy, a silent, flowing aurora of molten slag and vaporized metal. It washed over the place that had been my home, erasing every trace of our existence with the quiet, indifferent grace of a tide smoothing a beach. I watched as the cargo bay, our supposed ark, glowed white-hot and then simply dissolved into the shimmering river. There was no sound, only the awesome, horrifying spectacle of a world being unmade. It was the most beautiful and sickening thing I had ever seen. The cold, mechanical perfection of it all. There was no rage, no wrath, just a function being completed. We had not been defeated, we had been cleansed. My body screamed as I tried to move, the rebar in my side grinding against bone. I was alive. Somehow, the explosion from below had hurled me clear. A piece of human shrapnel thrown into the abyss just as the fire swept through. I wasn't the only one. Faintly, from the darkness around me, I could hear groans of pain, a few weak coughs. Looking around, I could just make out other shapes, other survivors, clinging to the shattered debris and wreckage that formed the lip of the hole we'd created. I saw Finn stirring not far from the unconscious form of his sister. Further down, clinging to a twisted girder, was Jax, one of his legs bent at an impossible angle. I counted 4, maybe 5 others, scattered like discarded trash in the wake of the cataclysm. Yara was not among them. The great, terrible engine above us was silent for the first time in my life. The constant, foundational hum that had been the soundtrack to my entire existence was gone. In its place was a profound, echoing emptiness. The plasma aurora above continued its silent, mesmerizing dance of destruction. The funeral pyre of our whole civilization, and we, the few miserable ghosts who had escaped, could only dangle in the dark and bear witness to the end. My gamble had paid off. I had saved them from the fire. I had saved them for this, a cold, dark, broken existence in an unknown abyss. Weeks have passed, or maybe it's days. Time has no meaning in the oppressive, eternal dark of the Undercroft's foundations. The glorious, terrible aurora of slag above has long since faded, leaving us suspended in a blackness so complete it feels like a physical substance, broken only by the flickering, pathetic beam of a single scavenged battery lamp. We number 7. 7 ghosts huddled on a jagged ledge of shattered plasteel and twisted girders, all that remains of the floor of our former world. Jax managed to set his own leg, his face a constant tight mask of pain. Ilara and Finn are quiet, shadows of the vibrant youth they were, moving with the shell-shocked slowness of the damned. The others are just faces in the gloom, their identities swallowed by the trauma of our fall. The familiar, lifelong hum of the engine is gone. Its absence is a constant, unnerving pressure in our ears, a tomb-like silence that is far more terrifying than the noise ever was. Every drip of water, every scrape of a boot on rock echoes endlessly into the vast, unseen chasm around us. The silence is a lie, though. Sometimes, in the deep dark, when the battery lamp is dimmed to conserve power, we hear things. The sound of something heavy dragging itself across stone far below. The faint, chittering clicks of something else, echoing up from unseen tunnels. We are not alone down here. We escaped the engine's sterile automated purges only to fall into an older, more primal darkness, filled with things the builders of the Undercroft never bothered to map. My cynicism, the hard, protective shield I wore for 40 years, was burned away in the plasma fire. It feels like a childish vanity now. In its place is a weight, a crushing, leaden responsibility for these 6 broken people I dragged into this new hell. They look to me. Their haunted eyes follow me in the lamplight, waiting for orders, for hope, for a plan. I have none to give. I am just as lost as they are. I saved them. That is the terrible truth I have to live with. My pragmatism, my desperate act of defiance, didn't grant them freedom. It just changed the nature of their prison. I look at their faces, hollowed out by hunger and fear, and I see my failure. I forced them to face the truth, and the truth was an abyss. Last night, Finn swore he saw a pair of pale, glowing eyes watching us from the darkness beyond the lamp's reach. I told him it was just a trick of the light, but later, when the others were asleep, I stared out into that same impenetrable black, and I felt it too. We are being watched. We are no longer a biomass anomaly to be cleansed by an unthinking machine. Down here, in the true foundation of the world, we are something else. We are food. We are trespassers. We are prey. And the silent, patient horror of this new darkness feels infinitely worse than the roaring, impersonal fire we fled.